Okay, great. Yeah, so today's session is going to be all about building a connector. So I'm going to walk you through that the whole hour. So first, let me introduce myself. My name is Daniel Laskowitz. I'm a developer advocate at Microsoft, and I'm doing this session because I have been building connectors for a long time, actually. I have been involved in the Power Platform for I believe it's 6 years now, a little bit over 6 years. So I have been seeing all the products in the Power Platform develop until what they are now. I remember way back when the Power Platform was just starting and Power Automate was still called Microsoft Flow. And back then, when I started, there were only 10 connectors or something, and we are now already at 800 connectors, or even more than that. So I've seen the whole product grow, and it's really cool to see that. If you have questions about connectors, feel free to reach out on my Twitter or LinkedIn. Please add me there if you have some questions. I'm happy to help you there. So on the agenda for today, I'm going to do a little intro on the Microsoft Power Platform for the people who don't have a clue about the Power Platform. So that's going to be first. Then I'll do a deep dive on connectors. And in that connectors deep dive, I'm going to talk about what is a connector actually, how can you use them, why would you use custom connectors. That's also a part I'm going to talk about. Then I'll tell you about how you can develop a connector. I'll give you a step-by-step plan for it. And also I'm going to talk about the connector types because there are multiple connector types, and you should be aware of that as well. And then, of course, I'm going to demo as well. I'm going to start building my first connector, or not my first, but your first connector. And I'm going to walk through that whole experience. I'll tell a little bit about the tools that you have to make it a little bit more easy for yourself to create a connector. And then I'll do another demo about how you can change the connector a little bit around. And that will also involve one of the tools that I'm talking about. And after that, I'll give you some resources. And I'll end with a wrap up. And there's also time for questions at the end of the presentation. So let's start with the Power Platform. What is the Power Platform? The Power Platform is a low-code platform from Microsoft, and it consists of multiple products. We have Power BI, which probably most of you already know, and that's about business analytics. It helps you to create analytics on your data. And then the second product that we talk about is Power Apps. And Power Apps is a product where you can easily develop applications. There's multiple types of applications that you can develop with Power Apps. You have Canvas apps and model-driven apps. I'm not going to deep dive into that, but it's good for you to know that as well. And Power Apps is, it's a little bit like a love baby between Excel and PowerPoint. That's what I always say, because Power Apps always includes the formula language of Excel. And it also has the UI a little bit about PowerPoint, because the screen looks almost like a slide. And you can add all kinds of controls to it, just like PowerPoint. And the formula language is just like Excel. So that's how I always explain it. Power Automate is all about workflow automation. And there's two types of workflows that you can create. You can create cloud flows, and that's the type of workflow that uses all kinds of cloud services. You can use all the data connectors there, the 800 plus data connectors that I talked about. Those are in cloud flows. And next to that, you also have the desktop flows. And desktop flows are like RPA, robotic process automation. And that's more of the local automation that you can do on your machine. So, for instance, if you want to automate an application that you have installed on your machine, you can use the desktop flows for that. Then we also have Power Virtual Agents, which is the chatbot solution for the Power Platform. It's a low-code solution where you can easily create chatbots by dragging all kinds of components onto a canvas. And it's really easy to create your own chatbot there. And then the newest addition to the Power Platform is Power Pages, and that's to build websites. And it's really cool to see all those different products because you can, of course, build websites, you can build apps, you can build workflows. But the really cool part about the Power Platform is that you can use all of these services together with each other. So, for instance, you can create a Power BI report and then show parts of it in Power Apps. You can use a Power Automate workflow that gets triggered from a Power App. You can use a Power Automate workflow inside of Power Virtual Agents. So whenever somebody is using a chatbot and clicks on a button at the end of the chatbot, it could fire a Power Automate workflow. And of course, for Power Pages, you can include a chatbot on your website if you want to. So there's all kinds of ways to use all those products together, and that's really, really nice. Below the Power Platform, you can see also a couple of other parts, and that's Dataverse. And Dataverse is actually a database plus. It's really, really advanced to use. You can create tables in there. It's all something that you can use as a low-code developer, but you can also extend on it if you want to. There's data connectors, and the data connectors are the ones that I just talked about. So it's the 800 plus connectors that you have within the Power Platform, which you can use within multiple of the products. Then you also have AI Builder, and that's the low-code artificial intelligence solution within the Power Platform. And that can help you to easily build AI models within the Power Platform as well. And if you look at the top of the slide, there's Dynamics 365, Office 365, Azure, and your own business apps and data. You can use all those parts also inside of the Power Platform, and you can use parts of the Power Platform also inside of those products. So you can, of course, use a Power Automate workflow within Dynamics 365 or use a chatbot in there. You can use Office 365 also together with Power BI. You can embed a Power BI report inside of Teams, for instance. And there's all kinds of possibilities there as well. And for the last part, your business apps and data, that's also really important because sometimes you have a business app that you build custom and that you also want to connect to the Power Platform. And that's, of course, also possible with, for instance, the connectors. The Power Platform is a place where everybody is welcome. So whether you like to do something with no code, with low code, or if you want to build code first. So if you are a developer, you can use the Power Platform as well. And you can use all those products that I already talked about it to your advantage. So yeah, it doesn't really matter if you are a low-code developer or if you are a pro-code developer. You can always use the Power Platform. Let's move on to connectors because that's the subject of today. So let's talk a little bit about what is a connector. And a connector is a formal definition of a REST API. It allows the REST service to talk to the multiple products. You can use it within Power Apps, within Power Automate, and within Logic Apps. So whenever you build a connector, you can use it in those products immediately. And that, you don't have to create a connector for those products one by one, but you can just use one connector for those products. There's already more than 800 connectors in the product, which is really impressive. And there are a bunch of them in here. You can get a connector, for instance, for Box, for Dropbox, for DocuSign, for Dynamics 365, for GitHub, for all kinds of products. You can use connectors. And that's really impressive, because when I started, there were only 10 connectors, only the Microsoft products. So, for instance, Outlook was in there so that you can send an email. But since then, the connectors really exploded, and you can not just use it for Microsoft services, but you can also use it for other services like Salesforce, SAP. There's a lot of stuff possible. So with all these 800 plus connectors, why would you use a custom connector? Why would you still create a custom connector for the Power Platform? And there are multiple reasons for it. You can, for instance, add a service that is not supported yet. So with 800 plus connectors, it's almost hard to believe that there's still a service left. But sometimes there are services that don't have a connector. And that could be an interesting moment to create a custom connector. Sometimes you can also expand on connectors that currently don't have the trigger or action that you want. It could be interesting to add on a connector that's already in GitHub, because there are some of those 800 connectors are actually in GitHub, and you can expand those, for instance, if you want. But sometimes you also want to create your own custom connector for that. Custom connectors are relatively easy to build. They don't require a lot of coding. You can still use the custom code feature within custom connectors to do coding. But it's pretty easy to build a custom connector, and I'm going to show that in a little bit during the demo. You can build the connectors through a wizard, UI wizard, or you can use a Postman collection, or you can use, for instance, Visual Studio Code if you want to. I wouldn't recommend that because it's pretty hard to start there from scratch. But if you use the wizard, for instance, which I'm going to use in a little bit as well, that's something that you can use first, and then you can fine tune it, for instance, later on if you want to use Visual Studio Code, for instance. And at the end, when you are done creating your connector, you can of course share it. You can package it and certify it through GitHub. So that's also interesting there. When you are building a connector, you should really know the docs about the API. You should know how it works, because that will save you a lot of time later on. So whenever you start building a connector, just look at which connector you want to build, which API there is. Look at the docs in there and see if there are some things that you should really know about that API. Usually the docs have all kinds of documentation on what inputs are needed, what responses are available. Some APIs are not really good at providing the docs. So when you want to build a connector, make sure that you pick one that has pretty good docs, and that will make your life really easier. You can start in one of the products. So you can go to Power Apps, you can go to Power Automate, or you can go to Logic Apps and start building your connector from there. Then you need to, of course, you need to set up the authentication. So what type of authentication does your API use? It could be anonymous, like the one we are going to build in a little bit. It can be OAuth 2, for instance. That's a really familiar type of authentication. You can also use API keys if that's what your API supports. But there are multiple types of authentication that you can use and that you can use within your connector. And when you're done setting up the authentication, it's time to define the operations. So then you really want to start creating the triggers and actions for your connector. So you have to think about what types of triggers do I want for my connector. For instance, if you look at the Outlook connector, there's a trigger in the Outlook connector called when an email arrives in your inbox. And that's something that you should figure out before you start building your connector. You need to think about what could some kind of trigger be for me. As well as actions, and those are a little bit different. The triggers are what really kicks off, for instance, a workflow, and the actions are what happens next. So, for instance, when you look at the Outlook connector again, the trigger is when an email arrives in your inbox, and the action could be send an email or create a contact or add a calendar meeting, for instance. Stuff like that could be an action. If needed, you can also add code because there is a custom code feature, and that's currently for C#. That's the one that's supported. It is still in preview, so you should be cautious about that, but I'm sure that in the upcoming months or in the upcoming half year at least, it will be general available. And at the end of building your connector, make sure to save and test your connector. I see a lot of people who are building connectors and they forget to hit the create button, and then they lose all their work. That's something that you should be cautious about as well. So make sure to save your connector, and at the end, test your connector, because testing is really important. It should work in a good way. You have a testing experience within the UI of the custom connectors. So use that one, but also make sure to test it within the product. So don't just test it in the UI of the custom connector building experience, but also use it within a Power App or use it within a Cloudflow, because that will help you a lot to experience how the end user is going to use it as well. So that's something you should be aware of. When you start building a connector, you have multiple experiences for that. So you can start by creating a connector from blank, and that's when you start from scratch. You can create from an Azure service, which is currently in preview, and that's really handy when you want to create a connector from, for instance, an Azure function, or from API management. That's really handy to use then. You can import an Open API file for version 2. So make sure if you have an API that already provides that, you can get started really quickly with those files. You can import it with uploading the Open API file, but you can also import it from a URL. So that's also really handy. There's also an import from Postman collection option. So whenever you use Postman and import that collection, you can do that as well. And you can import from GitHub. When you import from GitHub, there are a couple of connectors that are already available there. And those are already approved by the Power Automate team. So that's really nice as well. I see a question, by the way. Can we control what triggers and actions can be built in the connector, or it depends upon the API we are using? Good question. It depends on the API we are using. So when your API supports sending an email, for instance, you can create the send an email action, of course. Yeah, your API should really support that. I hope that's clear. Let's move on. The type of connectors that we have, there is a custom connector, which is the basic type that you have, that has an API availability for public or private. So your custom connector, when you use that type of connector, your API can be public, but it can also be private within your company. So that's really nice to have available there. The service owner, it could be the connector developer, or it could be somebody else. So that's also good to know. And the audience is always internal. So whenever you create a custom connector and you deploy it to an environment, only the people in that environment can use that custom connector. Let's see. I see a question. Please, is it possible creating an action that is not available for a trigger that is already available? I don't really understand the question. Maybe if you can elaborate, I can answer that later on. For the next type of connector, that's a certified connector. The API availability should always be public. The service owner is always the connector developer. So if you want to create a certified connector, you should be the owner of the service as well. So you can't just certify a connector that's not your API. If you want to go into the certified connector program, that is. And the audience is always everyone. So everyone in the world will be able to use your certified connector. And the last type of connector is the independent publisher connector. And that has almost the same characteristics of the certified connector, with the difference that the service owner can be somebody else. So if you are not the owner of the API, you can still submit a connector for that, and that's really cool. Because, for instance, if you have a certified connector, let's use a scenario for that. If Tesla would like to have a connector, the certified connector path, Elon Musk would be able to do that. So if Elon Musk would create a certified connector, and they would want to certify that connector, that's possible for the Tesla connector. But the independent publisher connector, when I would create the connector for Tesla and I would certify it as a independent publisher connector, I can do that through the independent publisher connector program. So that's also really cool. You don't have to be the owner of that API. The question I was asking, is it... Oh, Troy already responded to that. So yeah, that's you don't have to be you don't have to add both of them. Let's move on to the next one, and that's the demo of the building the custom connector. So let's start with that and share my screen. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna move my so I hope you can see my screen. Yeah, can you confirm?
Yeah. So,
yes.
yeah.
Okay, great. So, oh, there we go. So here we are in Power Automate. If you go to make.powerautomate.com, you will end up on a website where you can log in. And whenever you logged in, you will be able to see this screen. When you want to build your first custom connector, there's multiple ways that you can do that. You can go to data and to custom connectors. Then you can create your custom connector here, and you have the options that I just presented as well. So you can create from blank, you can create from Azure Service, and so on. So that's one part how you can go there. There's also the possibility to go to solutions, and that's the most important one, because when you are building a connector, Usually when you want to build it and create it for a big company, they would like to have a solution because solutions make it possible to easily transfer your connector from an environment to a different environment. So when you are building a connector for a production use, make sure to use a solution, because that's the easiest way to move it from environment to environment. But for now, I'm going to go to the custom connectors part. I'm going to click on the new custom connector button, and I'm going to click on create from blank. Now I need to create a connector from blank. I need to add a name. And the connector that we are going to build today is the Chuck Norris IO connector. And this is a website. It's a free API, which you can use to get Chuck Norris facts. And those are jokes about Chuck Norris. And if you look at the website, you can see that there are multiple endpoints. You can get a random joke, for instance, and it already shows you the response of the endpoint that you use. But you can also, for instance, get a Chuck Norris joke from a given category. And that's this endpoint. So that's api.chucknorris.io/joke/random, and then ! category is category. But to use that one, you of course need to know which categories there are. So that's why there's also an endpoint for retrieving a list of available categories. Then there's also another endpoint, and that's not what we're going to use, but there's also a free text search. So if you want to search a joke based on a query, you can do that as well. In this case, we are just going to use the retrieve a list of available categories and the retrieve a random Chuck Norris joke from a given category. So for now, I'm going to copy the URL to save a little time. I'm going to go to the Power Automate portal again, and I'm going to add the name of the connector, and I'm going to call it Chuck Norris IO. I'm going to hit continue, and then you will see the wizard to create a custom connector. Because I already added the name there, it's already at the top. And from there on, I can fill in some general information. I can upload a picture if I want to. For now, I'm not going to use that, but this is the icon that you can use for the connector. You can also define an icon background color. So whenever you upload an icon, you can also use the background color there. You can also add a description for your connector. So you can enter a description like this connector will retrieve Chuck Norris jokes. So that could be the description here. For now, we are not going to select the connect via on-premise data gateway. That's also possible to do it when you have a on-premises API, for instance. You can use that. For the scheme, we are going to use HTTPS, and for the host name, I'm going to use the URL that I just copied. And that's api.chucknorris.io. I'm just going to use the a part of that URL to make it really easy. Next, we're going to switch to the security part. Again, I already talked about this. You can use no authentication. You can use an API key. You can use OAuth 2.0. But for now, we're going to use the no authentication part. Next, I'm going to go to definition. And this is where all the actions and triggers gets posted. So here I can just add a new trigger or a new action. For today, we are only going to add actions. So when I hit new action, I can start by adding information about the action that I want to do now. And the action that I want to do now is retrieve a list of available categories. So I'm gonna fill that in here. So I'm going to call this get categories. And the description is going to be retrieve a list of available categories. And for the operation ID, I'm going to add get categories. So that's the first part. You see the learn more links here in the UI. I would highly encourage to click on those because when you do that, you will get redirected to the docs pages, and it will immediately take you to the right part of the docs page. So for instance, for summary, the one I just clicked on, you can also see where it will end up in the product. So this gives you some guidance on what type of case you should use, for instance. So use sentence case for summary. And you will also have some examples there. And it will also show you where you will see it in the product. So you can see here that it will show up whenever you are in Power Automate or in Logic Apps. It will show it the name of that summary on top of the blocks that you have available there. Let's go back to the screen here. I, by the way, used the wrong casing here because it was sentence case. So I will fix that now. There's also visibility, and that gives you some options as well. If you select none, it will just show it anyway. You have advanced, internal, and important. Internal will hide it. Sometimes you want to hide an action because it's only for internal use. Important is that it will always show up in the picker. Advanced is that it will show up below the see more link. But you can learn more about that also through the learn more link here. For now, we are gonna import from sample for the request because that's something that we need to do as well. And if you can remember from the website, here it showed that retrieve a list of available categories was a get operation. So I can select the verb get here, and I can add the URL that I copied. So here you can see https //api.chucknorris.io/joke/categories. And for the headers, I don't have to add anything in here, but it could be that the API you want to create a connector for can have that as well. So let's import that. And now I can see that it imported successfully. And that's only for the request. There's also a response. So when you have a lot of outputs from that action, in this case, it's not the case because it will just give you an array with all the categories in there. So we are not going to define a response here. But if you get a lot of outputs, then you should totally define a response. But we are going to do that for the other action that we are going to add now. So let me add a new action and go back to the website. And here we are going to copy the URL for retrieving a random Chuck Norris joke from a given category. And we are going to define a response for that now. So get a joke and add a description. So let me just copy paste because I'm really, really lazy. So let's do that. And add the description here. Get joke is going to be the operation ID here. And I'm going to import from sample again. I'm going to use the get, and I'm going to copy and paste the URL here. And I'll add that here. So here it says question mark category is and curly braces category. And that will indicate that the category is a query parameter. So when I import this, you can see that the category is in the query parameter part. And here we can edit that query parameter as well. So I can change this to category. So I want to have casing, for instance. I can have a description here, enter a category. I can also say if it's required or not. In this case, it's not required, so I'm going to leave it like that. So let's hit back.
Daniel,
and that's
sorry to
yeah.
interrupt. I think somebody in the chat asked if you could increase the zoom many.
Is this okay? Or I zoomed in a little bit more? Let's try it like this.
It seems good for me, but just wanted to let you know. Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks for telling me. Okay, I'm moving on to the response. Here you can see default. We haven't changed that for the other action, but for this one, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to select this. And then you can see again, there's an import from sample button here. And that's going to be your really big friend, because just like the request, you can also do that for the response. Zoom in again, you have zoomed out. It is worse now.
It seemed like you zoomed in to me. Not sure how it's going to pop up in the recording.
Yeah, I think this is how well I can do. Okay, I can select import from sample here. And here I can, for instance, define the JSON object that we get back from the API. And I can just copy the example response here and use that to import from sample. So here I do that, and I can hit import. And that will already give me the options here. So I can see icon, URL, ID, URL, and value. Those were the parts of the sample, and they are already available here. You can again edit them and just give them a title, for instance, to make them look a little bit more pretty in the product later on. So I'm going to do that for now as well. Also do that for the URL. And at the end, the value. So here we are. And that's the response that we're going to get. So for now, I think we're ready to go. So I'm going to hit create connector because I haven't saved yet. Oh, uh-oh. There is an error. Let me try again here. So I hope this is not going to be a problem. Let me try another name. So let's do Chuck Norris IO. And try again. Let's hope this will work. Okay, so the custom connector has successfully been saved. And that also helps us because if we go further in the wizard, there's a code preview part here. And that's the custom code feature that I talked about. We are not going to use that here, but you could upload your code here. So if you have a C# code file here, you can upload that here. Or you can enable it here and just fill in all the details here. But creating the connector helps us as well because you always need to create a connector before you can test it. So normally when you haven't created it yet, you will get a message here that you need to create your connector before you can create a connection. And the connection is always needed for the connector to test it out. I just created the connection by clicking new connection. And now you can see get categories and get jokes here as the operations. And I can test an operation here and see that I get a bunch of categories back. So for instance, I can see an animal category, and then I can go to get joke. I can test the operation without filling in a category. So I can do that. And I can get a Chuck Norris joke back, or I can add the category of animal and test it again. And then I'll get an animal joke back. So that's also possible here. As I told you before, you can create a connector here and test it out here. But you can also go to your flows. So the My Flows part here at the left side, and you can create a new flow. I'm going to use an instant Cloudflow now and call this Chuck Norris test. And I'm going to select a manually trigger a flow trigger, and I'm going to create this to show you how it really works in Power Automate. So when you add a new operation, you can hit custom, and that's where we can see the custom connector we just created. And I can see both actions here. I can get a joke and enter category here, just like I did in the testing experience from the custom connector. And I can also add another action, hit custom again, select the custom connector, and select get categories to get all the categories. And for the categories, we don't need an input, so it's just an empty block here. I can save it, and I can test it. And when I test this, it will sign in. I can hit continue and run the flow. And that's where you will see again the get categories, which will output all the categories that we have. And we can have get a joke with the animal category, and it will give another joke back. This is not the nicest experience because you have to manually input the category. And within custom connectors, there's also a possibility where you can, for instance, use the get categories action to fill in a drop-down here. And that's really nice to have. And I'm going to show you in a bit in the next demo how that works. So let me stop sharing and go back to the slides. And then I'll move on to the slides. And let's go. So here we are. I hope you can see the screen. Yeah, okay, great. Let's talk a short while about tools, which can help you with building custom connectors. The first one is the PACon CLI. That's the command line interface, which you can install on your PC, and then you can use that to download your connector locally, and then edit the connector, change around all the details there, and then update it again. You can also use the Power Platform Connectors VS Code extension, which is an extension where you have multiple snippets that can help you with developing your custom connector. And then there's also the Power Platform CLI, and recently they added the pack canvas create command, and that's a really cool command because it generates a custom, canvas app from a custom connector, and that can be really helpful to show that to your citizen devs or your makers that are going to use your connector. Because that canvas app will help you understand what can be done with that custom connector. And that was a short part about tooling. Let's go on to the next part where we are going to download, edit, and update the connector. So let me share my screen again. And there we are. Let me move the Teams out of the way. Okay. So for this part, I am going to use Visual Studio Code. And I already have Visual Studio Code open here. I have a directory open called connectors locally on my machine. And I also have a terminal window open here. And what I can do here is I can, for instance, use pacon login. And that command, I already used it before. Normally, it will show you a login code, which you can use for, you can use a URL for that and then select that URL. You can use the code to log in, and then it will authenticate you. So that's also a possibility there. For now, I'm going to use pacon download, and I'm going to hit enter. pacon download will also give you an overview of the environments when you haven't entered the environment by yourself, because you can do that as well. For now, I'm going to use number 8, the community demos. And here we can see that it already has the connector in there. So I'm going to select that one as well. And whenever I do that, it will download the connector as a folder on your local machine. And whenever I open up the API definition, I'm going to move the terminal out of the way. But what I can see here is the whole definition that we just built. So what you can see here is that we have the host api.chucknorris.io. We have the get categories action in here. We also have the get a random joke part here. So the get a joke action, and that's all available here. One thing I don't like is the fact that we have the category, but we haven't used this to combine it together with the category part. And for that, I'm going to cheat a little. So I'm going to move back to the browser, and I'm going to use Power Platform connectors. That's the GitHub repository that is available, where you can also submit your independent publisher connectors. And I already created a custom connector or an independent publisher connector there called Chuck Norris IO. And I'm going to copy and paste a little part from there. So let me do that. And I need this part. And that's the XMS dynamic values property. And that's a property that will connect your action or your input to the get categories action. And that will kind of create a link between those two. And that will make it much easier for you to select a category. So let me do that and add that to the parameter that we have here. And let me save it. That was a really short part actually. And now I can select pacon update. And I believe I can use settings here. Oh, sorry. I only need to cd into the right folder. And now I can do the pacon update settings and use settings.json. And let's hope this will run. So when I demo, it always takes long. Let's hope. Oh, there it is. It works. So let's go back to my flow and go back and reload this. So I'm going to edit the flow again, and let's hope that it picked it up. No, it hasn't yet. Let's refresh and see that it. Oh, it didn't work yet. Probably need to add it again. So let's try it again. So let's add get a joke. Oh, not working yet. Let's move to the data, custom connectors, and edit the connector. Let's see if the get joke part got updated. I think it didn't. I can also configure it from here, but let's update the connector and see if it works like this. Always great live demos. So let's wait until it's done.
Roy said you may want to add the action again.
Yeah, I just did that,
Okay.
but I'll create a new flow. Let's try that out as well. So let's create it and add the custom connector and get a joke. No, it's not there. Let's try the update again. And let's hope that will work.
When you were looking at the category
Yeah,
on the parameter, it didn't have the drop down, or it didn't have the other action selected.
yeah, I don't really know why that did, but I can configure it here as well, I believe. Let's try that again. Let's see if I can do it from here. So, oh, I have the wrong action. The get joke one. Let's select the category. And let's select the get categories there. And I can't select any part here. So let's try it again. And let's hope it's going to work now. I've done this demo before, and usually it just works immediately. So yeah, let's try it again. There we go. Yeah, there we are. So it just needed a manual step here. But you can now see that that the category field here, it's populated with all kinds of categories here. You can still use a custom value, but I think this is really a lot better for people to to select a category from here. So when you hit food, for instance, let's save this one and test it again. And when I open up the get a joke stuff, it will give me the value of Chuck Norris ID of fast food is chasing down a cheetah and cooking up on his barbecue. So that's a food joke there. So yeah, this is how you can use that. So always think about how your end user is going to use this. We could have done it without the dynamic values, but it's much nicer to have that that available here. So yeah, always think about that. Let me stop sharing and go back to the slides. Then we have a little bit of time for questions.
I think there was a question from Priyanshu.
Okay. Let me see. How to decide if the given URL in the get field of the API is a trigger or an action. Usually a trigger can be used for instance, polling. You have two types of triggers. So polling is usually it's like seeing if there's any new content available somewhere. For instance, if you get all the emails that you have and there's one extra email, that could be a polling action where you will see that there is an extra piece of content available on the endpoint. Yeah, you really have to think about the scenarios there, because if you have a URL in the get field and it's just sent an email or something, then you already know it's only an action, because sent an email is never going to be a trigger. So that's something that you should be aware of. I believe there is something in the docs about it as well, so that can help you with deciding if it's a trigger or an action. I'll share the link later. Yeah, let me close up with the resources. We will share the slides later, I guess, Julia. And then you can see all the resources here. There's some resources about the docs, for instance, how you can get your connector certified, the link to the GitHub, which I just showed you briefly. You can see all the Power Platform connectors in there, the normal connectors that are open sourced, the certified connector, as well as the independent publisher connectors. The link for the extended open API definition is also in here. And that's also the page which I showed with the Learn More links. That's the really handy page where you can see where all the different properties appear in the product. There's also a link to the custom code part for the custom connectors. There's some guidance on how to create a connector from Postman collection. There's some coding standards as well, policy support. I didn't touch upon that, but that can be really useful as well. And of course, the tools that I talked about are also available here. So the PA-Con CLI, the Power Platform Connectors VS Code extension, and the Power Platform CLI. For a wrap up, check out the top connector ask on GitHub and pick one. I believe Julia already has that link also available in the on the website. Go build your first connector and test. That's really what I want to tell you. It's really important to test it, because you saw just now that I updated the connector and sometimes it just doesn't work as expected. For instance, that's usually a user error, like me, when I did something wrong in the configuration, but it could also be an outage or something like that. But usually it's just my own fault in that case. And make sure to spread the word about custom connectors. They are really cool, and you can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. And that leaves a little bit of time for questions. I can run over a little bit. So if there are some more questions, please ask them. You can come off mute probably also if you want to ask it.
I have a question on
on
the bit of the APIs that you connect with. So they may be generated from any other language, so that you may just connect it. Let's say you have already existing app which you have created the APIs in maybe another technology, say Python and what, so you can connect it with the Power Apps. Is it possible?
You probably need to have something in between that. So it's not possible to write Python code or something inside of Power Apps, but you can, for instance, create an Azure function. And that's of course inside of Azure. And when you have that, you can also use Python, I believe, for that. And then on top of the Azure function, you can, for instance, create a custom connector, just like I did now. And then you can call that Azure function as an API. And then you will have just a little piece extra inside of your toolchain. But that's a way you can do that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes. Yeah, it makes.
Okay, good. I think there's a question about the recording. We will share that later on as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
good.
I see we have a question on the chat. So can you give examples when do you need to use C# code in a connector?
I can give one. For instance, if you want to transform the object you get or the object that you send to the API. So if you get a lot of like a big object back from the API and you want to have a different type of object, you can use transform for that, and then transform the whole object to something else. But what you can also do, and we have seen some examples in the community already. For instance, one of the things that people are missing from Power Automate is an action for regex, so regular expressions. That's something that you could do as well. So you can create a connector with a little bit of C# code, and it doesn't even connect to an API, but it gives you the possibility to at least check if a certain string is in a good format, for instance. So there's multiple ways that you can do. And in my resources, so if you, I believe you can also click on the links. So this one at the bottom, the custom coding, custom connectors. If you click on that docs link, you can see some samples in there as well. So Vitaly, I think you can find some great examples there as well. Is PowerFX a requirement to build connectors? It is not a requirement to build connectors. But it is to consume them inside of Power Apps and Power Automate, or at least Power Apps. Sorry, Power Automate is just clicking in the UI, of course, just like I did with all those boxes that you saw. But in Power Apps, for instance, if you want to use a custom connector in there, you always have to write PowerFX code there. But within custom connectors, there's no big need to have PowerFX there. Any other questions? Okay. I'm not seeing any questions come in. But thanks a lot for attending this. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have questions, please let me know. I'm more than happy to help you. And Julia?
So thank you so much, Daniel. I think that was an amazing demo. The demo got tried to come through, but at least everything worked. So yeah, just one announcement before probably I can hand it over to Jocelyn to close up the call for us. So I'll publish a blog with just a summary of what Daniel has covered today. So be on the lookout on that on the website. Then for tomorrow, probably you'd need some time to go over the resources that will be shared to try it out on your own. And I see Jocelyn had shared on the chat, in case you succeed in building something, please share on socials and let us know, tag us, and yeah, we'll be there to celebrate you. So we will meet again on Friday, where we'll have a part 2 of this demo. So Daniel actually will take us through a second part where we'll just do a deeper dive into more operations that you can do by, from the connectors that you built. So looking forward to seeing you all on Friday. I will send out the invites to your calendar. So yeah, also be on the lookout for that. So for the deck and recording, we will share those immediately after this on the discussion forum. So Jocelyn, in case you have anything else to share just before you close.
No, that was about it. Thank you all for coming. And like she said, please go ahead and share your experiences with us. We really just want to know how it feels, what troubles you're facing, or what successes you're having. It really helps us from the engineering side to know what we can improve on or what you're enjoying so far. So thank you all for coming.